Hello and welcome to episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Monday, July 31st. Hope everybody's having a good day so far and had a good rest of their day yesterday. Hope everybody had a good weekend. We've got a lot to get into today on the show. What a weekend it was for New York baseball. Just another crazy weekend in New York baseball. Another frustrating weekend if you're a New York Yankees fan. If you're a Mets fan, you say goodbye to one of your top pitchers in Max Scherzer in terms of pay and in terms of expectations, but he did not come through at all during his Met tenure. We'll get into that to open up today's show. We'll get to the Yankees as well later on. This weekend was another reminder that neither of these teams are going anywhere. The Mets aren't going anywhere because they begin to sell. It started with the David Robertson trade on Thursday night, and then it started with the Max Scherzer trade on Saturday. So things have really started to pick up for the Mets. They begin to sell. David Robertson gone, Max Scherzer gone. It seems as if they'll hold on to Justin Verlander. But what's next? Who else do they move on from? Do they move on from any of these guys? Do they move on from a Marte or somebody like that? Do they kind of stay put and hang on to who they've got and roll with it the rest of the season? Maybe call up some of the young guys? What else do the Mets do before tomorrow's deadline on August 1st? And if you're a Yankees fan, yesterday was pathetic. Last night, I should say, was pathetic. The entire weekend was pathetic because you win the game on Saturday, which was great. And then you sit Judge last night, and last night, again, all your problems came back. Without Aaron Judge, all of your problems came back. Severino is terrible. Garrett Cole on Friday pitched the gem. Yankees can't score a single run. Anthony Rizzo last night still can't hit. He'll now go 2 months in a row batting in the 100s for the last 2 months, June and July, as we enter into the final day of July tonight. So, I mean, it's pathetic. Baseball's terrible around here this year. We'll start with the Mets trade. We'll start with the trade of Max Scherzer. We'll also get into the Yankees, as I mentioned, and their mess. What do they do before the deadline? And again, you see all these other teams making moves, and there's Cashman just sitting on his hands, not doing a single thing. Like, is Cashman awake? Is he aware that this team is sinking? And if he wants to save it, he's got to start picking up the phone and making moves. I mean, all these guys, some of these guys that the Yankees were interested are now all off the board. Cody Bellinger off the board because the Cubs have won eight or nine straight, whatever it was, and now they're not going to sell. They're going to fight for a final wild card spot in what is a crazy National League wild card race where there's like 5-6 teams that have a legitimate shot to get into one of those three spots. So if you would have woke up and traded for him a couple weeks ago, you probably could have had Bellinger in here, which we've talked about on this show. The Yankees are a mess, so we'll get to them as well. We'll get to Aaron Boone's comments as well last night, saying that he liked the at-bats. He thought the at-bats were good last night, even though the Yankees struck out 18 times and there's 27 outs in a Major League Baseball game. So they couldn't hit and they couldn't pitch. And what's next with Severino? I mean, this guy is having one of the worst walk years I think I've ever seen in my life. I mean, Judge last year and a year before free agency hit 62 home runs. Luis Severino's cooked. I mean, he's done. He said it last night. He's one of the worst pitchers in baseball. He is, without a doubt. So we'll get to that later on after we talk about this big Mets and Rangers Max Scherzer trade. And that's where we start today on this Monday morning, the final day of July before we really get into the dog days of August. And again, it all started on Thursday night for the New York Mets, where they went out and traded David Robertson to Miami Marlins. You had the whole weather incident where it started raining. David Robertson was warming up. It started raining. They ended up going back in to the clubhouse. He didn't warm up anymore. Then it was Brooks Raley who came out. David Robertson was informed he was going to get traded. Sure enough, they traded him. If you're a Mets fan, many Mets fans were not very happy with the trade. I personally, even though I'm not a Mets fan, I did not like the trade from a Mets perspective. I thought they could have probably got a lot more prospects in return. I probably thought they could have waited a couple more days because the more you wait, the closer you get to the deadline, the more urgency teams get. If you would have waited to it today or even tomorrow, teams would have given up higher-end prospects, not just two 18- and 19-year-olds that aren't going to be ready until 2026 and 2027 or their estimated time of arrival. So it was an interesting trade for the Mets. The return wasn't great. They got rid of David Robertson, who was their best reliever, did a very good job in the half a year that he played with the Mets. It made sense for them to trade him because they weren't, he's a free agent at the end of the year. They were probably just going to let him walk because they'll get Edwin Diaz back. But their return was underwhelming. Now, then, that was the first part of it all. Then you go into Friday after Scherzer pitches. He goes out there and speaks to the media and says how he has to talk to the brass about, what is the deal with, what they're doing. He has to talk to them about the whole issue with the David Robertson trade. He doesn't know why they're trying to trade, doesn't know why they're trading their best reliever in the middle of a playoff race and all that stuff. He says he has to talk to the front office after the David Robertson trade. And then you go into Saturday, and midway through the day, you hear that the Mets are trading Max Scherzer. And for a while now, we've heard rumors. I didn't think much of it. We heard during the middle of June there was reports that Scherzer would be willing to waive his no-trade clause and, and be welcome to a trade somewhere else. Again, that was middle of June. That was a month and a half out from the trade deadline. That was obviously right in the middle of the June swoon for the New York Mets. So it was understandable that those rumors were coming out. And sure enough, I guess those rumors were true because you get the trade, and the only thing that was in the way for the New York Mets and for the Max Scherzer trade to get through was Max Scherzer's approval to get the deal done. And Max Scherzer ended up waiving his no-trade clause, and he is now officially on his way to the Texas Rangers. And the Max Scherzer era in New York was one of the most complicated eras, even though he only played a year and a half with the team. Because really, when you break it up, it's almost broken up into like 2-3 parts over these last year and a half. He made 23 starts in 2022 and 19 starts this season in 2023. A very complicated tenure, even though he made 41 starts with the team in 2 years. It was a weird tenure. It was a frustrating tenure if you're a New York Mets fan on the back end of it. But this is how I look at it. And again, we'll get into the trade and everything this means for the Mets and why I actually think it's a good deal for the New York Mets because there's not going anywhere. They do pay a decent chunk of his contract, but so does Texas. They do get a good prospect in return that's got a lot of potential, and he actually has a chance to be up at the big league level next year, some way through next year, or even maybe the year after, because his estimated time arrival is 2024. So we'll get to that here in a second. But when you look back at Max Scherzer's tenure with the New York Mets, it really is kind of broken up into 3 parts. The first part was good, where he was dominant the entire season last year up until the final week of the season where they went into Atlanta and got swept. And they held first place the entire year, went into Atlanta, got swept. Scherzer was awful. And then you go into that playoff start, and then he allows 7 runs against the San Diego Padres, and they lose that wild card series. So the first part was the good. He was dominant. He hit the IL. He was obviously hurt for a little bit. It took him a while to finally pitch with Jacob deGrom, actually go back-to-back in the rotation. But Scherzer was out there, and he was dominating. That was part 1. Part 2 was he collapsed in the biggest moments. Biggest stage, New York, playoffs on the line, division on the line. I should say division on the line because they made the postseason either way. Playoffs or division on the line against Atlanta. He collapsed in Atlanta. Wild card series against San Diego, 7 runs, collapses, gets booed walking off the mound. That was part 2. And part 3 was this year. And this year has been a disaster. And we've talked about this when the deal went down back in the 2022 offseason for the New York Mets, or the offseason going into 2022. There's always a risk signing older players. There's always is. Because the drop-off, some guys slowly drop off, and some guys, the drop-off is sudden. And Max Scherzer, it does look like the drop-off is kind of sudden. Despite blowing it last year against the Braves and against the Padres, he finished last season with an ERA of 2.29 and a whip of .91. A whip under 1 and an ERA in the low 2s. I know how the season ended, but it was very good. And once he was healthy, he was starting every 5 days, giving the team length. He was the Mets' best pitcher last season. And then you go into this year, and he pitched to a 4.01 ERA, and the whip went from .91 to 1.19. to pitch into the low 2s and then go north of 4 is ugly and very concerning. So the drop-off for Max Scherzer this season, I don't know if I want to say it's unexpected because he is 39 years old. And, he just turned 39 on July 27th, and things can happen, like drop-offs happen. We've seen that before. But it was pretty sudden. I mean, this is a guy now, not nearly the same player he once was. Was it that he didn't want to be with the Mets? I mean, we've heard that he likes New York, so it's not like he wasn't motivated to pitch every 5 days. That's just not who Max Scherzer is. He just never looked like the same pitcher at all this year. And from a Mets perspective, why hang on to that guy? I know you're still going to eat a decent chunk of his contract, but why hang on to him if you're not going anywhere this year? And if he's probably going to opt into his contract next year, and you're really going to be in a tough spot. Might as well get something for him now, ship him away. All right, pay the contract. Obviously the Rangers will pay some of it. He'll opt in next year with the Rangers and move on. That was a smarter decision for the New York Mets. In their return, they got a very promising prospect in return. So this is the full deal. So the Mets get Luis Angel Acuna. He's 21 years old. His estimated time of arrival is 2024, which is next year. He's an outfielder and an infielder. And he now slots in as the number 2 prospect in the Mets organization. And this is Ronald Acuna's brother of the Braves. So just as a baseball fan perspective, taking away my Yankee fandom and, the fact that I'm not a Mets fan, just removing that, and just as a general baseball fan, I think most of us can agree, I would love to see Luis Angel Acuna, I believe that's how you pronounce the name, I would love to see him work out, because I think the battles between him and Ronald Acuna for the next 10 years, if they work out in the same division together, would be a lot of fun. I think two brothers going at it. If the Mets find a way to turn this thing around next year and the year after, and if Acuna, Acuna obviously with the Braves, but if Acuna here on the Mets works out and gets up to the Major League club and is a big piece moving forward, then that would be cool as a baseball fan. Like seeing two brothers in a division race go up against each other, one for the Braves, one for the Mets, two rivalries, I think that would be a lot of fun. So I would like to see that work out for them. It's a lot better of a return than you got for David Robertson. They got two 18 and 19-year-olds that you have no clue what they're going to be. Acuna, you can kind of tell. I mean, the guy's raking right now in Double-A, and he potentially could make his debut next season. So when you look at the Mets' top 5 prospects, Kevin Parada ranks at number 1. Luis Angel Acuna, number 2. Ronnie Mauricio, number 3. Jet Williams, number 4. Alex Ramirez, number 5. So those are your top prospects for the New York Mets. And Marco Vargas, who they got in the Robertson deal, was the Mets' sixth best prospect. He now drops to being the Mets' 7th best prospect. And his time of arrival is in 2027. So it makes that trade look a little worse as well. But Acuna, what he's doing at Double-A right now is simply phenomenal. He's hitting .315. He's got 7 home runs, 51 RBIs, 42 stolen bases, which is crazy. 362 at-bats. He's got an OPS of 830. He's in Double-A right now. There's a lot to like. There's a lot to like about him. He's only 21 years old, as I mentioned. He gets called up maybe next year if he could play a role in the Mets next season, if they go with a little bit of a youth movement and get younger, but still find a way to contend. The Mets might have something there. And obviously the Rangers get Max Scherzer. When you break down the contract, so Texas will pay $22.5 million to Scherzer's contract. Mets will cover more than $35 million. And Max will opt into 2024 season with Texas. So it's funny. Again, another storyline of this deal is you had Scherzer and DeGrom in New York. DeGrom goes to Texas. He's obviously got the Tommy John. Now Scherzer goes to Texas with DeGrom. Do they ever pitch together? I don't know what DeGrom's future is. I mean, he'll probably be back. Who even knows if he'll pitch at all next year? So I don't even know if you'll ever see Scherzer, DeGrom back-to-back again. But he does go to Texas. Rangers get another arm as they continue their push to contend for a championship in the American League because they're right there. I mean, they're obviously leading in the AL West. And you look back at the contract for the Mets, it's ugly. 3-year, $130 million deal, $43 million per year. I mean, that is an ugly, ugly contract. One of the biggest contracts we've seen in MLB history, and it didn't work out. I mean, the fact that he's out after a year and a half and only kind of a half of that, for a full year, he's been bad pretty much. About that, because you go back postseason to this year. He has not been good this year, Scherzer. He hasn't. And I know he pitched well the other day against the Nationals. It's the Washington Nationals. They stink. Right? You won 3 or 4 against them with everything going on. You still found a way to take 3 or 4. So I'm not too. I don't know how this is going to work out for Texas from a Texas perspective, because they have Eovaldi, they've got Dane Dunning, they've got John Gray, they've got Martin Perez. They've got a lot of pieces. They add Scherzer, they still have DeGrom. They have a lot of pitching pieces. Dane Dunning's been very good this year. John Gray and Nathan Eovaldi have been stepped up. Martin Perez, not quite what he was last season after having a career year last year. So it'll be interesting to see if Scherzer, playoff race, new team, fresh start, if he gets back to the Max Scherzer that he was just last season. But the Mets faced a harsh reality, got the harsh reality of what the risk is of picking up an old pitcher, picking up a guy in his late 30s. The risk is what Max Scherzer turned into after last year, where he pitched to a 2.29 ERA. You can tell, though, towards the end of last season, he started to wear down. And now you look, he goes into this season, and he's got an ERA of 4.01. He's got a whip of 1.19. He's been one of the biggest disappointments in baseball this season. And he was on a team that is one of the biggest disappointments this season after all the money they spent, highest payroll in the MLB. So the Max Scherzer tenure is over. I think a lot of Mets fans are happy with it because of the way it went. Again, only the fact that he only made 41 starts as a New York Met. 23 last season, 23 last season, 19 this year. I apologize. 42 starts as a New York Met. And in those 42 starts, a lot took place once he made that start and who knows, maybe that ended it. I mean, there's a good chance. We've seen times where guys are at the peak of, or at the biggest stage, against Atlanta or even the wild card. That's not the biggest stage, but New York, the media. I mean, he got crushed after that San Diego Padres outing. He allowed 7 runs. He's getting paid $43 million per year to pitch in those big games, and he collapsed in the 2 biggest games of the season. There's a chance that he just wasn't able to recover. I mean, we've seen that with guys where the spotlight's on them, they break down, and they're never the same. It's just how it is sometimes. Is that potentially what happened with Scherzer? It's possible. Maybe a fresh start in Texas, a little less pressure than New York, although he's going to probably be pitching in playoff games if he stays healthy, so there's always going to be pressure there. I don't know. It's just a weird collapse, how good he was last season. And then just the Brave series hit, and since then it's just been a downward spiral. And overall, a very disappointing tenure. Very disappointing. You picked up Max Scherzer to pitch in big moments. He flopped in the 2 biggest moments of the season last year, and now is traded after hurting the team this season with a 4.01 ERA, not being the same pitcher. And now he leaves, and the Mets are probably not a playoff team. So with Max Scherzer, in the Max Scherzer tenure, they won 1 playoff game. And Max Scherzer wasn't even a part of it. It's another way to put it as well. So Mets move on. We'll see what happens with Verlander. I mean, again, deadline's tomorrow, so, Verlander said he would like to stay here. Verlander's been a lot better recently, I will say that. If I was the Mets, I'd probably hang on to Verlander because this is a guy that has at least shown that he's figured it out this season. I mean, his ERA was ugly there for a while. His ERA is now dipped. It's 3.15. So there's a chance that Verlander finds a way to end this year with an ERA below 3. It is. He's a 3.15 ERA. He's had a very, very good month of July where he's pitched to a 1.69 ERA. And he's been a lot better. Unlike Scherzer, that was pretty poor for the entire season. So if I'm the Mets, again, Verlander's 40 years old, but He showed a little bit of signs of slowing down earlier in the season, but he's really picked it back up recently. So I would probably hang on to Verlander if I was the Mets also, because if you move on from Verlander and you move on from Scherzer, you're just giving away, Scherzer wasn't good, but if you move on from Verlander can legitimately still be a high-end rotation guy. And he could still be an ace for a staff. And I think Verlander still wants to be here. Scherzer, as much as he liked New York, I don't know. After those comments on Friday night, it seemed like he was kind of fed up with what took place with David Robertson, and it seemed like this has been in the works for a little bit. But, again, I think you would have to get a whole lot for Verlander. If you want Verlander, you're going to have to get a lot for him, because now you're giving up 2 of your top highest-paid pitchers, and then you're kind of starting from fresh then. Now, you still have Kodai Senga, who's put together a nice season, 3.17 ERA. Billy Epler put it that this isn't a full rebuild. It's kind of forget what he said. I forget exactly the wording, but it's more of a retool. Like, they moved on from Scherzer. He's not making an impact. His contract's terrible. You move on. He's not the future. Verlander still got some gas left in the tank. I think that's obvious. I think he's shown that. He's pitched a lot better recently. So I don't know. I don't think they'll move. I don't think they'll move on from Verlander. We've heard rumors that they're probably going to stick with him, but if they would, they're going to need a whole lot back. So who knows? And who knows who else they might move on from him. And it's just an interesting deadline here. We knew they were probably going to move on from Robertson. They did. I think Scherzer, there was a lot of fans that wanted it to happen. I don't know. There wasn't many rumors. There was just a lot of fans that wanted it to happen. Fans got their wish. And now you go from there and you see what happens. So it's funny. What flew under the radar is the Mets did take 3 or 4 against the Nationals this weekend, but they really didn't make up any ground in the wild card race because they're still 6.5 games back. I believe they went into the weekend series against the Nationals like 7 games back, and now they gained a half a game. So the Mets season's over. They're selling. They're moving on. They're clearly not looking at postseason. And yeah, they're 50-55. Now you move on, and I would call up Mauricio if I was them. I would continue to play Vientos, Beatty, who hasn't been very good, but just continue to roll him out there. Obviously, Alvarez has been rolled out there a ton. He's been very good. I would call up Mauricio. Call up the young guys. Roll with them. See what you got in them. Let them roll with maybe they do a September call-up if they're really done. Maybe they call them up in September and just roll out the young guys and let them play. I would personally do that because figure out what you got in some of these young pieces. Potentially, the Mets probably will be able to contend next year, but they've already poured in a lot of money. They're still pouring in a lot of money to this team because you still have the contracts of Lindor, you still have the Verlander contract, you still have the Starling Marte contract. So there still is a lot being poured into this team. Call up the young guys, see what you got in them. So we'll see. But anyway, Mets trade Max Scherzer, move on. Rough tenure as a New York Met, and the Mets will now get ready for a 3-game set in Kansas City against the Royals after a 3-4 series win against the Nationals, which completely flew on the radar, rightfully so, because winning 3 or 4 against the Nationals does not mean a whole lot considering the Nationals are not very good. So now I move on here to the other, I don't even know if I want to call it just baseball team, but the other disaster in New York, because the Mets and the Yankees have been nothing short of 2 dumpster fires this season. And the Yankees again this weekend go into Baltimore. You start up this 10-game swing of Baltimore for 3, Tampa for 3, and then Houston for 4 starting on Thursday. 7-game homestand coming up. Rays and Astros starting tonight, Monday through Sunday. 7 games straight for the New York Yankees. You go into Baltimore, Judge is back. You're like, all right, let's see what they can do. Find a way, take 2 of 3 from Baltimore. Just find a way, take 2 of 3, go into Tampa, whatever they do at the deadline, maybe get reinforcements. All right, feeling good. Judge is back, great. And once I heard Judge was coming back, like officially, I knew I still have no hope in this Yankee team. With Judge in or out of the lineup, I still have no hope. And even with the Saturday win, you knew with Sevy going on the mound last night and no Judge in the lineup, that is a recipe for disaster. So back-to-back week now on ESPN Sunday Night Baseball, the dumpster fires that have been the New York Mets and the New York Yankees were on full display. Mets last week lost 6-1 to the Red Sox on Sunday Night Baseball. And now this week, the Yankees lose 9-3 to the Orioles on Sunday Night Baseball. And I'm so sick and tired. You heard it last night on ESPN. And it's not a shot at the ESPN broadcast, but I'm so sick and tired of all these people saying, oh, the Yankees get guys back. They make deals at the deadline. If Stanton and Rizzo get going, this team can still win a championship. The same words have been regurgitated time in and time out. Oh, if Stanton gets going. Oh, if Rizzo gets going. If this guy comes back from injury. Loaiza's on the way back. You've got Judge back. Go out and make some trade deadline moves, and this Yankee team's going to win a championship. Can we just stop with that nonsense? Can we stop with the ifs and, oh, this guy's coming back. This guy, if he gets hot, you got to be positive about this guy. Oh, we're going to trade for this guy. Can we stop? This team's going nowhere. The season is over. The team stinks. It's an embarrassment every night this team takes the field. And the issues of this team go deeper than just the guys on the field. And we've talked about that so much on this podcast. The players are not performing. The manager and the coaching staff is terrible. I mean, I called that. I said it. All these fans, all these people wanted Dylan Lawson fired. Great. Fire Dylan Lawson. Fire the hitting coach. It's not going to do anything. What has Sean Casey done to this team? Everybody was like, oh, Anthony Rizzo. Let's see if he can adjust and help Anthony Rizzo. Anthony Rizzo last night went 0 for 5 with 5 strikeouts. His first 5 strikeout game of his MLB career. Trade him. Get him out of here. The least you could do is get him off the books for next season. This team's a train wreck. And again, like I look, Stan has the whole no trade clause. I would move on. You're not going to get much for Rizzo. You're not going to get much for anything for these guys because they have no value. Like, if you move on from Rizzo, who's going to want Anthony Rizzo right now? The guy is slow. He's washed. He's terrible. And I like Anthony Rizzo. I do. He's a nice guy. He's a good locker room guy. He's very, he's good with, he's just a good person. I do like Anthony Rizzo, but I've got to be blunt. He's not good right now. He stinks, and he's been bad for 2 straight months. It's one thing to go through a week or two stretch or have a bad month. That's going to happen over the course of 162. But when it's 2 straight months of batting in the 100s, and his batting average at the beginning of the year was upwards towards the 310s, 315, 316, I think is how high it's gone. And his batting average now is all the way into 244. I mean, that's just pathetic. That is an absolute collapse. This month, he's hitting 163. In the month of June, he hit 173. It actually got worse from June to July. And no way you can just sit here and say, oh, don't worry, August coming around, he'll get right. And August is a tough month for the Yankees in terms of schedule. This is who the Yankees have on their schedule coming up in August. You've obviously got the Rays for 3. You have the Astros. The White Sox stink. But so do the Yankees. Then you have the Marlins, the Braves, Red Sox, Nationals aren't good. Then you have the Rays and the Tigers. So you have to face the Braves. You got to face the Marlins. 2 teams that are, right, Braves are dominant. Marlins are all right, but I'd probably go ahead and say the Marlins are probably better than the Yankees. I would take the Marlins over the Yankees right now because the Yankees stink. Red Sox have shown they're better than the Yankees. The Yankees are in last place, a game back of the Red Sox. You've got obviously the Astros for 4, which, I mean, there's a good chance that the Astros are going to go into Yankee Stadium and sweep the New York Yankees. There's a really good chance that's going to happen. Because, I mean, I just wouldn't be shocked. I mean, the Astros have dominated the Yankees for the last 6 years. Why would this time be any different? So, there's no chance Rizzo, there's probably 0 chance Rizzo gets going because the competition's only getting better. Same thing with Stanton. He hits the home run the other day. I mean, the guy, for the amount of money he's being paid, it is inexcusable that his batting average is only 202. and how much pop he's supposed to provide, it's inexcusable that his OPS is only 722. I mean, this team is atrocious. They don't hit. And when they get a good outing from Gerrit Cole, they don't hit, and they're wasting his prime. And that's the toughest part as a Yankee fan. That's the toughest part for me. That's the toughest part of this struggle for me as a Yankee fan, is the fact that they're wasting Gerrit Cole and Aaron Judge's primes. They're wasting them. Because outside of Gerrit Cole and Aaron Judge, and I've made that clear on this pod, nobody on this roster is untouchable outside of Aaron Judge and Gerrit Cole. Look, I like Volpe. Some of their prospects, maybe they're a little bit promising. But if Soto became available today and the Padres came calling and said, hey, we would like this guy, I mean, it's Juan Soto. He's proven. You got your outfielder for the next 10 years figured out. You want to give up Volpe? You want to give up a guy like that? Go ahead, do it. I mean, Volpe, like I shouldn't say that because I'm not ready to quit on Volpe yet. But like a Peraza, I mean, I would trade him. I mean, Florial is not going to do anything. I would move on from him. I mean, there's a lot of prospects I'd be willing to. You look at this current roster, I'd be willing to move on from a lot of guys. I mean, it's terrible. If a team came calling right now and said, hey, we want this guy, I mean, I think anybody on this roster is available outside of Aaron Judge and Gerrit Cole. This team needs a complete overhaul. They need a front office change. Hal Steinbrenner deserves some blame. Brian Cashman deserves blame. Aaron Boone deserves blame. Blames to go around. There are so many internal issues with this organization. It's sad. It starts from the top down. Brian Cashman built this dumpster, and Aaron Boone's just not a good manager. There's no accountability. He's like a puppet when he talks to the media, and what he said last night is just, it's mind-numbing. Mind-numbing. We'll get to the quote here in a second, but his bullpen decision-making's terrible. He'll take pitchers out when they're at 64, 70 pitches, which I know in the modern-day game happens a lot, but when a guy's cruising, when a guy's going, I don't care about the analytics, and I hate Aaron Boone's analytical approach, too. They love this analytical approach. This analytical approach is just, it's working great. It's obviously working great because they're not in a playoff spot right now. And then Luis Severino last night, I mean, he's done. He's toast. Sevy is toast. But I got to get the Boone's quote here for a second. So, Gary Phillips last night reported this from the Yankees and their offense. So, Aaron Boone last night on the offense. Outside of the strikeouts, I thought at-bats were building off of last night. Meaning Saturday night, which they hit well and they won. I'll give it to them. I thought we grinded out really well. We made it really tough on Kramer. We couldn't finish off. So that's what Boone said. If you heard that and you didn't watch a single inning, a single pitch of the game last night, and you had no really, like if you were just a baseball fan and you heard that, you probably would have said, all right, Yankees probably put up some runs. They were probably, playing well. They probably were tough, right? That's not the case. The Yankees struck out 18 times last night. 18 times they struck out. And that was the comment from Aaron Boone after the game. I mean, that's another example of a fireable offense. The guy goes in there and basically talks up his players, how good they played, how good their at-bats were when they struck out 18 times. And again, I mean, 18 strikeouts last night for the Yankees. Every player except one struck out. That was Harrison Bader, was the only guy last night that didn't strike out. Other than that, Jake Bauers, 3 strikeouts. Gleyber Torres, a strikeout. Giancarlo Stanton, 3 strikeouts. Anthony Rizzo, 5 strikeouts. Stanton and Rizzo have been the most disappointing pieces of this team. And again, last night, as I mentioned, they went a combined 1 for 9 with 8 strikeouts without Aaron Judge in the lineup. And we saw it on Friday night. Like, Judge walked 3 times. Teams don't have to be, teams can just pitch around Judge now because there's nobody else in this lineup capable of picking up the slack and actually hitting. Unless if we're playing the Kansas City Royals or the Oakland A's. Those are the only two teams we can beat. I showed you the record the other day. The Yankees against the A's and the Royals are like 9-3 or something. And against every other team, they're under 500. Like, without Judge, there's nobody in this lineup that can do anything. IKF struck out twice. Greg Allen, Volpe each struck out. Higgy struck out twice. I mean, it's just a disaster. It's a disaster. Glaber, I know they're deep in trade talks with the Marlins, with Glaber. We heard the same thing last year. The Marlins are very interested in Glaber. Look, I don't know what's going to happen with Gleyber Torres. I don't know if they'll move on from him, if they stick with him. We heard this same thing last year where they wanted to trade him. They were close to a deal to get Pablo Lopez. Hindsight 2020. I believe that the Marlins pulled out last second, and that's why the Yankees ended up. I believe that's why. Well, I think that's why the Yankees. I don't know. They traded Monty too for Bader. You know, and yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen with Glaber. Look, Glaber, I would trade Glaber personally. I would, because at some point though, you got to do right by the player. Like, you got to decide either you're gonna trade him or you're not, because from a player perspective, it's got to be rough for him to every single year hear, "Oh, I'm traded." Like, if I was Glaber, I'd go up to the Yankees and ask, "Hey, do you want me or do you not?" Like, at the end of the day, you've got to figure out a decision. You've got to make a decision. Like, Cashman's got to wake up and figure out, all right, am I going to trade Glaber or am I not? Every single year for the last, 2 seasons, we've heard about the Glaber trade talks. And I'm not anti-trading Glaber. I would, but in my opinion, all right, you got to make a decision. Not every single season you could talk about how this guy should be an all-star, like Boone said, and then try and trade him. Like, all right, pick somewhere in the middle. Figure it out. Is he an all-star and do you believe in him and you keep him? And you believe he's the future, which he's not because he's just not the player that we expected him to be, or do you go out and trade him? You got to make a decision. Like, at some point you do. You have to figure it out, just from a player's perspective. Like, it's got to be tough for him. Every single year he hears about this, but then he also hears his coach talk about him like he's the next great thing at second base. So, it's like, what's the deal? Wake up. Figure something out. By the way, Sevy, ERA this year is now at 7.49. He can't make another start for the Yankees. Whether you release him, whether you trade him, you could probably get something very minimal for him. He's toast. He's shot. He's done. I mean, you can't, during a playoff race, if the Yankees do decide to pick up a player or two tomorrow or today, whenever it is, whenever Cashman decides to wake up, whenever Cashman's alarm goes off, is maybe when the Yankees will start to make a move. But he allowed 9 runs last night again. I mean, I don't really know what more, we have to see out of Sevy to just know he's toast. If you decide to make a push towards the playoffs, if the Yankees decide to do that, go out there and buy and try and make a push, Sevy cannot be a part of it. You can't let him roll out there every 5 days. It's just not going to work. His next start's going to be against the Astros. You really trust Sevy against the Astros? You got to do something with this guy if you do decide to push for the playoffs. If you don't, and you're just hanging up on the season, well, it doesn't matter if he goes out there every 5 days and lets up 9 runs because the season's over anyway. But you got to do something. So it's just a mess. And I've talked about this a lot too, where if I was Brian Cashman, and the Yankees do this every year, they see all these names go off the board, and in last second, they settle for plan C and D. That's just the way the Yankees are. It's not the Yankees were 20, 25 years ago, but it's the way they are now. They settle for, they're okay with plan B and C. They try to get you to buy in. They haven't figured out left field in years. They're a mess. But, and I've talked about this, a week ago, when they swept the Royals at Yankee Stadium, I would have went out and traded for Cody Bellinger. Right there. Right at that exact moment. To number one, send a message to the locker room that, hey, we're still in this thing. And number two, Bellinger was available. If they got on the phone and said, hey, can we have Cody Bellinger, let's make it happen, you probably could have got him. You waited an extra week, And now he's off the board because the Cubs began an 8-game win streak, and now he's off the board. That is why you make trades, that is why you don't have to wait until the day of the trade deadline to make moves. The Cubs, since then, are 8-2 in the last 10. They did lose yesterday, so their win streak is over. But they are now 3.5 back of a wild card spot, and instead, they're going to try and get into a wild card spot in what is a wild National League West, or National League wild card. I don't know why I said NL West. But that's, I would have traded for him a week ago. You probably could have got him then, before they went on this long win streak. Now it's too late. I mean, and that's another thing, too. There's been some rumors about Dylan Carlson. Why? Why exactly? I understand he's young. I get it, and I get there's, again, that aspect of it. But why exactly would you go out and trade for a guy that's hitting .230 and has a .673 OPS? You compare Dylan Carlson's numbers to Aaron Hicks's numbers overall since joining the Orioles and the Yankees combined. They're basically the exact same thing. So why go out? I understand he's a switch hitter and stuff, but why do that? Why? If you wanted an outfielder, if you wanted a lefty bat, it should have been Cody Bellinger, and it should have been done a week and a half ago. And I've talked about this. You're entering your 10-game stretch, the toughest stretch of the season. You should have made moves before this stretch started, instead of waiting till the middle of the stretch to say, you know what, we're struggling, let's bring in a guy. It just hurts my head. It hurts my head with this organization. This organization is a complete debacle and a complete train wreck. But Dylan Carlson, the last 2 years hasn't been good. He just hasn't been. His best season came in 2021, where he hit .266, had an OPS of .780, and knocked in 18 home runs. Since then, he's done nothing. He had 8 home runs last year, no power, no pop. Does Cashman realize that it's 3:14 down the line in right field? There's a short porch and a lefty bat that can provide some pop and hit for contact as well, like a Bellinger hit, 280, 290, 300 and provide some pop. Does he realize that would be beneficial? The Yankees last night, they don't understand the concept of a lefty bat. They don't understand it. They don't roll out lefty bats. Every lefty bat that the Yankees have brought in, or they have, is a complete, utter disaster. Rizzo stinks. Gallo was awful. Benintendi wasn't any good. I mean, every lefty bat the Yankees have, and they don't have many. They very rarely roll out a lefty bat. Last night, they had one lefty bat. Look at the Orioles. They're loaded with lefties, and they're 64-41. Look at the Yankees. I mean, last night, they rolled out Bowers and Rizzo. And Bowers had a meaningless home run. And Anthony Rizzo, went 0 for 5 with 5 strikeouts. Those are your lefty bats. Jake Bowers and Anthony Rizzo, everybody. And Hal Steinbrenner's confused why the fans are upset. And Aaron Boone's saying that they put together good at-bats. I mean, it's dumb and dumber. I mean, that's really what it is. It's the Three Stooges. Not Dumb and Dumber. It's the Three Stooges. 2 movie reference there. Or 2, whatever. Three Stooges were a show. But you get what I'm saying. Hal Steinbrenner, Brian Cashman, Aaron Boone. You want to put in Aaron Boone and all of Aaron Boone's coaching staff as well into the Three Stooges. Go ahead, do it, because they all count. Matt Blake, Sean Casey hasn't done a single thing, which I'm not surprised, because I knew the hitting coach wouldn't do anything. Every time a team fires their hitting coach, it never works. We remember the Mets, when they fired their hitting coach, their hitting actually got worse. So I don't know when fans will wake up and realize that firing the hitting coach doesn't do a single thing, especially in the middle of the season. You want to readjust players hitting, you got to wait till the offseason. But I don't even know at this point. I mean, Jordan Hicks is off the board too. Would have been some bullpen help. Instead, the Yankees let him slip away. He goes to a division rival and a team they're fighting for a wild card spot with in Toronto. The Yankees, they need starting pitching help too. They need a lot. Catcher, third base, left field, starting pitching. I don't, no way do I see Brian Cashman making 4 moves. Randall Grichuk, not available anymore. Bellinger obviously taken off the trade deadline, whatever. Soto, probably, the Yankees aren't getting Soto. I just knew that. It's a pipe dream. I think if I'm the Yankees, I maybe sell a little bit, retool, give away some guys. You want to trade a Rizzo, get him off the books? I would. I mean, I don't really, I don't even know what you do really right now. You could stand pat and just roll this lineup out to the rest of the season and then readdress it in the offseason. You want to do that, and then I would personally fire everybody. I would tear it up. I would move on from Cash, move on from Boone, bring in a general manager that knows how to build up a farm, knows how to build up a team from the ground up, retool a little bit, younger, get more athletic, get younger, more contact-driven, and bring in a manager that's going to hold players accountable. And just let Hal just sit back and watch it. That's what I would do. Just bring in a guy like a president of baseball operations that can you want to bring in a Theo Epstein? I would welcome that. I don't know if he would ever do it, but I would welcome it. Do something like that. Bring in a guy with experience. Bring in a guy, get a fresh start. Like the Yankees, everybody in this Yankees organization have been in the organization for 20 plus years. That's not how it works anymore. People have, the league has caught up with the Yankees. The Yankees are now behind. It's embarrassing. So, anyway, the Yankees tonight against the Rays. Another loss incoming. What is it? It's Tyler Glasnow versus Domingo Germán. Glasnow's 4-3 with a 3.36 ERA. Germán 5-7 with a 4.77 ERA. So, until the Yankees prove otherwise, I fully expect a loss tonight because that's just the way this team has rolled really ever since the beginning of the season. So, anyway, that'll do it for the podcast here today. We'll be back tomorrow talking all things sports. Check out Bubbs Talking Bronx Bombers. I'll probably pot up on there a little later. In the Trench with Gangrene. Got a lot more coming your way there. Jets training camp recaps after each practice. We'll have my preseason preview coming up on Wednesday before the game against the Browns on Thursday, the Hall of Fame game. Also, Jets player previews Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Today's player preview was up on In the Trench with Gangrene, McCole Harmon, and Will McDonald. So check out that. 3 of those previews every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, taking you up until week 1 against the Bills. So a lot more content getting pumped up on that channel as well. So that'll do it for an episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. As always, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.